Hello, welcome back. I'm with Richard Williams again, the CEO and Director of Cornish Metals. Richard, great to be with you again.
Thank you, Peter. Good to be here.
Run us through the updates from since we last spoke. I think it was quite a few months ago now. So what's been happening on the ground?
Well, a lot has happened. We've obviously had to expand the team and ramp up to get the construction of the water treatment plant underway. So we've gone from having about 8 or 9 employees a year ago. We've got now 36 full-time staff at site in Cornwall. And on any given day, anywhere from 10 to 20, 25 contractors working on site. So we're in the midst of building the water treatment plant. All of the reactor tanks and the clarifier tanks have been installed, and the next stage, which should start this week, is to install all of the structural steel, the walkways and the stairways around the water treatment plant. Most of the pipe work has already been installed, so we're on track now for commissioning of the water treatment plant in May, June this year.
Good. Just for those who potentially might not have seen the last video, obviously Cornish Metals is a tin development company, very high grade. Just a really brief overview, but could you also just remind people of the capital structure as well?
Well, the project itself, South Crofty, has got a very long history of mining. The first recorded production was in 1592, and kind of in a compressed way, the first 300 years of mine life was really as a copper mine. And then the copper prices dropped at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century. And the miners actually found as they got deeper, they lost the copper and got into high-grade tin at depth. So it became a high-grade tin mine from 1905 until its closure in 1998. Currently, it's the highest grade tin resource globally that's not in production. It's permitted. We've got a mine permit that's valid until 2071. We've got full planning permission to build a process plant, and we've got the environmental permit to dewater the mine because it is flooded. Last year was a really transformative year for the company. We attracted an investment from a private equity firm called Vision Blue Resources. They invested £25 million as part of a £40 million raise. And that funding was designed to take South Crofty through construction of the water treatment plant, dewatering the mine, feasibility study to get to an investment decision for project financing and to put South Crofty into production.
Good. And just remind us the capital structure as well, if you don't mind.
We've got around 535 million shares issued. We trade in both on the TSX Venture and AIM. I think we're the only tin company that's dual listed. Market cap right now is around, I got to get this right, around 100 million, 120 million Canadian, 80 million pounds. Vision Blue, as I said, they own around 26% of the issued capital.
Good. Okay, so obviously Vision Blue came on board last year. You're now at the point where the water treatment plant should be commissioning in around this summer?
May, June.
May or June, yeah. Right. What are you doing whilst that's going on? Obviously, once that's commissioned, you start dewatering the mine and you start sort of working on focusing on actually building this thing.
Yeah.
But what are the steps to get there essentially?
Well, in parallel to building the water treatment plant, we're trying to accelerate the feasibility study as much as possible. So we've got 3 drill rigs active on the project currently, drilling the eastern, central, and western parts of the mineral resource area. We've got 2 of those rigs are surface drill rigs, and one is drilling from what's called the Tuck-in Mill decline on the western side of the project from underground. We've collected about 70% of the sample size that we need for metallurgical, the process flow sheet, paste backfill studies, leach studies, and just looking at optimizing on also ore sorting studies just to see if the mineralization or the style of mineralization is amenable to ore sorting. And the benefit of that is that potentially we could reject 30–40% of the mined material before it goes to the mill, which means that the mill size is smaller, power consumption is less, the cost to build the mill is less. So all of those studies are underway. And the plan when we raised the money was for the dewatering of the mine and the feasibility study to run in parallel and to publish the feasibility study towards the end of 2024.
Good. What can you tell us about exploration targets? What sort of exploration model are you using at the moment? Where are you using these additional funds, and what sort of returns are you hoping from them?
Well, what's really interesting about Cornwall, even though you've got a long history of mining activity, and I think something like 2,000 documented mines throughout the county, is there's been very little in the way of modern exploration applied to the whole region. And we've always said that the best place to look for a new mine is next to an old mine. And our geological team, Owen Mylop, our chief operating officer, they were looking at some of the historical work that was done on the southern margins of South Crofty. And there was a very small bit of drilling done in the 1960s, which intersected a structure that was called at the time the Wide Formation, which occurs parallel and beneath a historic mining district called the Great Flatlode. Now, the Great Flatlode was mined over about a 5-kilometre strike length. It started off similar to South Crofty as initially a copper mine, and then became a tin mine at depth. And so we tested this theory that this Wide Formation is parallel to and lies beneath the Great Flatlode last year, and we published those results in January this year. We found the Great Flatlode within 5-10 meters of where we expected it to be. We intersected 3 meters of 1% tin, which is extremely exciting because, you know, it effectively a drill hole, needle in the haystack type thing, and we've got ore-grade mineralization, potentially mineable, in a structure that's never been mined, never been explored. If it's anything like the overlying Great Flatlode, you've got a target that could be up to 4 or 5 kilometers long, hundreds of meters down dip, and 2 to 4 to 5 meters wide. So the plan going forward, because it's so close to the existing resource at South Crofty, we see potential, if it is there, that you could do some underground development from the existing infrastructure at South Crofty to access it. So it represents potential not only to expand the current resource at South Crofty, but also look at production expansion if it does come through.
And how would that work? Say for example, underneath the Great Flatlode and this western extension, how would you go around sort of modelling, or I guess there's still a little while left until the feasibility is to be released.
Yeah.
You've got a bit of time there to test this exploration model.
Yeah, this target would not form part of the feasibility study.
Yeah.
You know, the feasibility study is really geared towards what we have currently at South Crofty. The Wide Formation, it's really got 2 holes into it. One from the 1960s and one that we did, that we announced earlier this year. So there's quite a bit more work to be done just to look at the continuity of mineralization, better understand the geometry of the structure and, you know, where the mineralization is. But once we get a sense for that, it'll give us an idea of what the resource potential is. And that would be something that we would work on in parallel, and to, you know, we'd look to build up a resource for the Wide Formation in parallel, hopefully to construct in South Crofty.
And historically, what sort of grades of copper? You were saying that originally the sort of the open pit or near surface material was copper, then you'd get at depth you'd find higher grade tin. Is there still potential for these copper deposits to be in and around the area? And what sort of grade were they historically?
Well, as an example, the United Downs target that we drill tested last year, the historic mine at United Mines had an average grade of around 7.5% copper.
Wow.
But these were in narrow, high-grade vein structures. Similarly, at Consolidated Mines, which is also very close to United Mines, similar grades. So it was a very high-grade copper district. That's 12 kilometers east of South Crofty. At South Crofty itself, we've seen some drill intercepts that were getting 8 to 10% copper over 1 to 2 meters. But most of those structures, we believe, have been exploited because a lot of those areas are prospected over the last 400 years. And you're not looking at vast amounts of copper in these lode structures compared to, say, some of the big porphyry copper open pit deposits that you might see in South America, or the sediment hosted copper deposits that you see in Zambia and the DRC. There's potential for mineable material, don't get me wrong, but the focus for us is really the high grade tin. Tin is now a critical mineral under the UK guidelines. It's a critical mineral in Canada, the US. There's no tin production, primary tin production in Europe. There's none in North America. So, you know, I think Cornwall has a big role to play when it comes to supplying tin to the whole energy transition and the technology drive.
Well, I want to talk to you about the tin market. Just before we go on to that, actually, can you just remind us about sort of the size of the license area that you hold in Cornwall as a whole, not just at South Crofty, but... Well,
I'll start with South Crofty. The South Crofty underground permission, which is effectively the mine permit, covers about 1,500 hectares. It's about 4 or 5 kilometers by 3.5 kilometers. And then outside of that, we've got about 15,000 hectares of additional mineral rights spread throughout Cornwall, some of which include old historic copper tin mines. United Downs is a good example. And then down to the west, we've got another project called Guinea, which was, again, a high-grade copper mine back in the 1600s, 1700s. The model that we see as relevant to Cornwall is that the overlying sedimentary rocks hosted the copper, tin, zinc, silver mineralization. And then as you get deeper into the underlying granite, that's when you lose the polymetallic nature of the mineralization. It becomes tin rich. And, you know, the average grade of the resource that we have at South Crofty is around 1.6% tin, which at today's prices, if you compared it to, say, a copper equivalent grade, would be about three to four times, 4.5 to 5% copper grade. That would be the equivalent.
Okay. And what's the priorities in terms of exploration whilst you are building South Crofty and even further afield? With all of this exploration land, obviously you're talking about the area adjacent to South Crofty, which obviously sounds like something you have to follow up. But how much more focus is going on United Downs? How much more focus on any of the other licenses?
Well, right now, I think the focus for us is South Crofty. Let's get South Crofty dewatered, deliver the feasibility study, make a production decision, because South Crofty is going to be the hub for production, and any other new resources are going to have to work through South Crofty. We've looked at the geology within South Crofty, and if some of you viewers want to go to our website, there's a really interesting long section through the mine, which shows the extent of the near surface copper mines, and then the extent of the underlying tin mine of South Crofty. And you can see just from within South Crofty, there's enormous potential to expand laterally to the northeast, southwest, beneath the old copper mines, which has never been explored. So just within the mine itself, we estimate potential for anywhere from 17 to 21 million tons resource potential. We don't know how much of that will convert to mineable material, but historically you're looking at anywhere around 40 to 50% of that material would convert to mineable resources. Then we've got the wide formation, which is still within South Crofty, but on the southern margin of the project, which has enormous potential. Then we've got United Downs to the east. So, I think if we were to prioritize, we've got to look at near mine exploration potential first, and then look at more distal opportunities like United Downs, like Guinea, which would be longer term opportunities, but they also represent potential to increase production. And I think that's important. The current process that we're going through is to look at optimizing the mining rate based on the current resources that we have at South Crofty, but there is room to expand not only the resource base, but potentially throughput and production over time.
Okay. I want to look at the tin space. It's been fairly fluctuate. You call it fairly fluctuant. I'd say within the last couple of years or so.
Yeah.
But I guess for those who are less familiar with tin, why should people be excited by it? Why is it important?
Well, tin is essential to all things electronic. I think that's the most important thing. I think there's still this perception out there that the main use for tin is tin plating, tin cans, etc. But the big change for the use and consumption of tin happened about 20 years ago when the EU passed legislation outlawing the use of lead solder. So anything today with electrical connection has got tin in it in the form of solder. Around 50% of all tin consumed today goes into solder. There was a research study done at MIT in the US a few years back, which looked at new technologies. So you're looking at not only electric vehicles, battery technology, renewable power, power storage, robotics, data storage, data processing. And then it looked at all the different metals that were used in those different applications and ranked those metals on which would be most impacted by growth in use. And tin came top of the list, which surprised a lot of people. And the reason for that is that there are hundreds of millions, if not billions, of electrical appliances that are produced and sold every year. They've all got tin in them. Any little electrical connection has got tin as the solder. And then you look at, the acceleration to achieve this energy transition from traditional forms of power generation into solar power generation, wind farm, wind turbines. And one of the biggest growth areas for tin recently is a product called solar ribbon, which is the copper wire that runs through solar panels, which is coated in a thin layer of tin. And so I think we still need to gain some traction or broader understanding in the market of the importance of tin to this whole energy transition. And that's why I think, forward-thinking governments like the US, Canada, and the UK now have got tin on that critical minerals list because it is essential.
And what's the market size for tin at the moment? And I think I guess we had another chat recently on lithium outlook, and we were talking about this sense of nationalization or nationalism that's emerging in most larger economies at the moment. I mean, say for example, just the EU, for example, how much tin does Europe actually produce as a whole, and how would South Crofty fulfill all of that need? Would it fulfill a portion of it?
Europe's consumption is around 50 to 70,000 tons of tin per year. There's no primary tin production in Europe. There's some recycling of tin. There's some byproduct tin that comes from the tungsten mines in Portugal and Spain. But that's it. So 75% of all the mined tin today comes from three countries: China, Myanmar, and Indonesia. And if end users are concerned about either, from an ESG perspective, what the impact on the environment or social impact of some of those operations, you can look at Indonesia, and most of the production there is from dredging offshore, has a big effect on marine environments. You can look at Myanmar, production in a conflict area, and you've got to wonder if some of that revenue production is going towards funding that conflict. China, there's always concerns about human rights aspects. And so I think consumers are becoming a lot more educated and aware of and demanding of manufacturers like Apple, like Samsung, like Panasonic, like Google, of disclosing where these minerals come from that they use in mobile phones, iPads, computers, etc. And I think that's the opportunity that sits in front of us here. Is some of those end users are going to demand that the products they're using is responsibly mined, responsibly sourced, and we can tick all of those boxes. On a regional level for Europe, we would never be able to produce all of the tin to meet Europe's demands, but I think Cornwall itself has a great opportunity to see not only production from South Crofty, but other areas where there is potential to try and meet some of that demand.
Yeah, because I think in my mind, it's even if a portion of European companies, or even if it does become into legislator, that we do need a bit more scrutiny on actually where these metals are coming from. The fact that South Crofty doesn't even fulfill European demand, let alone drop in the ocean, I guess, in terms of global demand, it becomes quite a sought after product.
Well, I think just to put, I come back to your question about demand. Current demand consumption is around 360, 370,000 tons of tin metal per year. Of that, about 20% comes from recycling. And so the balance is all mined tin. And as I mentioned, 75% of the mined tin comes from China, Myanmar, Indonesia. The International Tin Association, they talk to all of the different stages from exploration, mining, smelting, refining, processing, manufacturing, research and development, what potential new uses of tin are. And they've looked at projected consumption over the next 5-10 years up until 2030. And they believe we're in what's called, what they refer to as a technology supercycle, where you're getting not only the energy transition, but the expansion of data processing demands by more and more people to have faster, quicker, at your fingertips. And that all require, and it comes down to 5G networks, again, which need more tin. They are projecting demand to reach 500 to 520,000 tons of tin per year by 2030. That's an increase from today of around 150,000 tons of tin annually. The PEA we did at South Crofty in 2017 looked at annual production in the order of 4,500 tons of tin per year. You'd need over 20 South Crofties to come on stream to make production to meet that projected demand. And we've looked across the tin world to see what kind of projects are out there that could come in and meet that demand, and we just don't see it happening. So, you know, right now, yes, we've seen some volatility in the tin price, but we see that as short-term noise. Over the longer term, I think demand is going to continue to grow. And when you have this kind of global uncertainty in the financial markets, it makes it difficult for projects to secure the financing they need to get into production. And that means the lag from needing it to get in new production and new supply online is going to take longer. And, you know, we benefit right now from having the investment from Vision Blue Resources. We can advance South Crofty to a production decision over the next couple of years and hopefully meet that growth in demand. And that'll be perfect timing. That's what you really want to see as a project when you come on stream.
Agreed. Richard, thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.